Hi, I'm Joanne Callahan, and I'm going to just share a little information about what thought field therapy is and how it can be used. I'm rather uniquely positioned to talk about it because it was my late husband, Dr. Roger Callahan, who discovered and developed this modality for healing back in the 1970s, in the late 70s and early 80s, with his first publication in 1981. It's been initially, Roger was a licensed clinical psychologist, so he started with the negative emotions. However, as time has progressed and as we have expanded these tools over the last 40 years, actually, we find that we can heal mental, physical, and emotional challenges as well as spiritual aspects. So it's become a very whole mind body concept for healing. What we're doing really from the very beginning is working with the body's energy system. And Roger discovered through a diagnostic process that there's sequential coded information within the energy systems. And what we're doing is accessing and addressing that sequential coded information, just like in acupuncture or acupressure. TFT, or thought field therapy, uses the same systems that the Eastern medicine uses, that the Chinese use the dantians. We also use the dantians, but our main focus is with the meridian system. Originally, he just called it the Callahan techniques. As he developed and wrote books and did work on thousands and thousands of clients over the last 30 years of his life. So we found that it can be safely self-applied. It has been safely self-applied for the last 40 years with no reported case of harm. Not many modalities can say that. And so this makes it unique for working with special needs and infants, children. It's not placebo because it works equally as well on animals and infants. And of course those with special needs who's perhaps more challenged as far as focusing on the problem. Originally, he called it the Callahan techniques. And in 1994, Florida State University was running a research project called the Search for a Cure for PTSD. And at that point, Roger needed to name it, and it was called thought field therapy. And we were working with PTSD. But it was the original tapping modality. Now we know of many different actual offshoots of TFT, or thought field therapy. And it was the beginning of the energy psychology movement way back in the early years. One of the things that sets TFT apart from other modalities is that it can be safely self-applied or applied by a caregiver or a caretaker or a parent, which just makes it that much more readily available to those with special needs or limited access to licensed help. So what we found is that in our research in Rwanda in 2006, we began a series of studies that led to TFT being considered evidence-based. So the trauma relief work demonstrated that it's evidence-based. And in that research, we used trained local community leaders to help the victims of the genocide. And their results that they got in these studies were equally as good as had we sent in a team of healthcare professionals. So it allows TFT to reach broader, more diverse markets. The other unique thing about TFT is that it's not necessary to relive the trauma. While this may be useful in many therapies, it's not necessary in TFT, and in some cases it's not possible. It's not possible or just far too painful for the victim to relive or recount or repeat the story in their head. And I want to just share one quick example of this because it was so clear to see that with the body's wisdom and tapping the sequential coded information, you can access the underlying trauma. When we were working with the orphans in Rwanda, one of the children, they were treating 400 orphans, and during the day, one of the young children came in that was just 12 years old. And he said, well, he didn't remember the genocide, so he didn't know what he wanted help for. But he had sand in his eyes, and he was constantly rubbing his eyes. And so he didn't want to be left out. He wanted to be able to tap like all the other children. So the therapist that was there working with him said, well, let's work on the sand in your eyes. And she led him through the same trauma algorithm or tapping sequence that we used for all the others while he focused on the sand in his eyes. And additionally, he had not been able to see clearly. He couldn't see leaves on trees or anything. And when he finished the tapping, at first he started to cry a little bit. And the therapist thought, well, maybe that's like washing the sand out. And then he stopped and he ran over to the window and he looked out and he said, the trees have leaves on them. And then he ran over to the little makeshift wooden table in the room and picked up the piece of paper and said, I can see these. And he drops it and runs out the room. Later that day, the director of the orphanage came in and he said, what did you do? Jean-Pierre can see. And the therapist that was working with him just said, well, we just treated him like everybody else. He had no memory of the genocide. The director said then, well, we never told him this, but we found him face down in the dirt under a pile of dead bodies. He was the sole survivor in his village, but we never thought it was necessary to tell him that. So you see, he didn't know what the trauma was. The therapist didn't know what the trauma was. But by focusing on the symptoms, they were able to get a very profound healing. And of course, this director is still one of our trainers in Kigali, Rwanda. And that held up, that treatment held up. So the ability to not need to relive the trauma can often be a very big asset in healing, especially when either they can't remember the trauma or they've dissociated or they have they're challenged mentally or physically. So those are some of the things that TFT stands out in. Additionally, PTSD results often in stress and anxiety. And there's studies that have shown that tapping, and TFT did the first study in Japan that showed it normalized cortisol levels, and then one of the offshoots of TFT, EFT, has shown the same thing in the last few years, that the cortisol levels are normalized. We also have demonstrated that the autonomic nervous system is balanced with tapping, with TFT. And this helps balance out that fight or flight syndrome that we all get, and it brings us back out of that fight or flight stress response. So there's so many benefits within TFT addressing our autonomic nervous system, our hormone or endocrine system, and allowing healing processes to take place. We have another unique thing to TFT is it is very adaptable. We have multiple levels of it. Within TFT, we have a beginning level that has common tapping patterns. Then we have a diagnostic level where you can determine specifically the sequential coding that is needed. And then we have what we call our voice technology level, which allows us to diagnose and treat non-locally as well as determine much more effectively the source, underlying source sequential coding that is needed. So because of the variety that we have as far as levels, application and levels, it also allows us to adapt to any situation, any complex problem, or within special needs. Because we're working at an energetic level, often when you're working with special needs, the treatment itself can be applied to yourself and gently transferred through a caregiver. So there's a lot more flexibility within this. And what I'd like to do is have one of our longtime practitioners, Dr. Nora Baladarian, who's been practicing TFT since the 90s, since the late 90s, who specializes in helping very complex cases and special needs. And she can demonstrate for us what a typical TFT session would be within that population. So I'd like to pass it on to Nora and Dr. Baladarian, and then you can see really how quick, simple, and versatile TFT can be for adding it to your toolbox.
As she said, I'm a licensed psychologist in Los Angeles, California, and I'm going to do a demonstration of how I work with patients using thought field therapy. So thank you so much for coming and agreeing to demonstrate with me how this is done. As you know, thought field therapy uses the acupressure points to release the feelings of trauma or despair or whatever problem it is that the patient brings in. So I'm going to begin now and show you how a regular therapy session would go. So, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So, you called me to see if I could help you with some problems that you're experiencing. And so I wonder if you can think about what problem you want to work on first. Tell me when you've got that. Okay, that's pretty clear to you. And would you mind telling me, just in a couple of words, what the problem was?
Sexual assault.
Oh, okay, sexual assault. All right, thank you. So that gives me some guidance into what tapping sequence of thought field therapy I'm going to use with you. Are you familiar with thought field therapy at all?
I am not.
Oh, okay, so this will be a brand new experience for you. It's very easy. I will be doing the therapy along with you. We'll use the stimulation or tapping on various acupressure points. Are you familiar with acupuncture or acupressure? Okay, great. So you know that there are energy centers in our body. So when we do the therapy, I ask you to think about the trauma. I'm not asking you to tell me about it. You already know everything about it. I don't need to know everything about what happened, but I do know what to do about those feelings. So if you could think about that trauma, it must come to your mind from time to time. On a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is that reaction that you have, or how bad does it feel when you think about that?
I would say a 9.
A 9, okay, that's pretty high. So what we're going to do is just ask you to focus on that 9. And now what I'd like you to do is begin the therapy. So I want you to just gently tap right where the eyebrow begins, thinking about that 9. And now under the eye, on the bone right under the eye. And now under the arm, right about where the bra strap comes in the middle of the rib cage, thinking about that 9. And then here on the collarbone spot. Okay, good. And now relax. And if you could bring that to mind again. and think about how bad it feels. See if there's any shift, if you're still at the 9 now.
More like a 5. Wow.
Yeah, wow, it is nice, isn't it? Did you feel some energy release from you? So that's the first of 3 steps that we take. So now we're going to do the second step. So focusing on what remains, that 5. I want you to make a fist with your hand, and with the other hand, take your index finger and put it in between the last knuckle and the 4th knuckle, and go back about 1/4 of an inch. You'll feel kind of a little dip right there. You feel it? Okay. So release the fist, and we're just going to be tapping on that spot, thinking about what remains of that traumatic feeling, and close your eyes. And open the eyes. Without moving your head, look down to one side. Look at me. Look down to the other side. Look at me. Now roll your eyes in a big circle, one direction, and then the opposite direction. And now, if you would, please count aloud 1 through 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then hum. Count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and now just relax. Focus again on that sexual assault. See how bad that feels now.
It's less, it's like a 3.
Like a 3. Okay, that's great. And now if you can, we're going to tap again on the eyebrow spot, focusing on the pain that remains from that. And then under the eye. And then under the arm. And then again on the collarbone spot, if you run your finger down to the V in your neck, down about 1 inch, over and about 1 inch. And relax, refocus, think about that sexual assault and see how bad it feels now when you bring it to mind.
It's down to a 1.
It's down to a 1. Okay, and we're on a scale of 1 to 10, right? So that's a nothing, right? Okay, so thank you so much for letting me know. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for letting me know what the problem was. So that will be the first of our treatments that we'll be doing together. So now you have an understanding of how I'm going to work with you on the sexual assault, so that when today you leave, you will no longer feel as bad as you did when you came in. Now sometimes there's other aspects of it, or maybe during the week before you come back, you may think, but I still feel a little anxious, or I'm angry, or there may be some other things that you'll notice, so that we'll work with those the next time that you come in. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming.
So what we have done is a demonstration of how a thought field therapy session would work. Obviously, there are other parts to the therapy. We didn't show an intake session, but we showed what one can do actually in a first session, and I've done this many times in a first session, where people just feel the complete release and relief from the trauma that they have experienced. And this works by using the thought field therapy identified 14 acupressure points in a particular order for a particular problem. So I love using this particular therapy, particularly with folks with developmental disabilities who may not actually be able to do a 1 to 10 rating, but when I ask how bad does it feel, they can show me by stretching their arms out, and as they improve, they often do like this, or they might go like this, demonstrating that when they think about it, it doesn't hurt anymore, which for me is the whole point of going to therapy, is to feel better and to feel healed from what the problem is that brought them in to see me. So,
where did this come from?
Oh, what a great question. This came from actually Dr. Roger Callahan, who was a psychologist. He's deceased now. And he was looking for a way that he could accomplish this. a release of the feelings. And he was working with a woman named Mary who had a lifetime terror of water. She would only bathe in this much bath water, and it was just awful for her. And he had been looking and looking for a cure for her. Couldn't find it. So he started working with Dr. Goodhart in applied kinesiology, and he became familiar with acupressure, acupuncture. And one day he just said to her, Mary, think about your fear of water and just tap here under the eye, which is the stomach meridian, which is where we feel fear, right? So she only tapped there like 3 or 4 times, started laughing hysterically, and went outside of his office at his home to the swimming pool. He freaked out. He said, Mary, don't go out there. There's a pool. It's water. And she said, don't worry, I'm fine. And she scooped up some water from the pool, first time in her life. So he thought, this is magic. I'm going to do this on everyone. Tapping under the eye did nothing for anybody, but it cured her. And he continued to see her, but the next week she came back. She'd taken a bath, which she had never done. The next time she came by the ocean, went to the ocean for the first time. So he said, there is something important here. I'd better investigate this. And that was the key to learning about the other acupressure points, about doing muscle testing to see which point in which order works for which problem.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming in. And I hope that you look up thought field therapy, look up rogercallahan.com or www.rogercallahan.com to get information about training and more information about practitioners in your area.